Morning, everybody. And as you can see, Bruce is not here. So I'm standing in, or actually I'm sitting in his stead. So that's good. And Bruce, I believe, will be online. So before we make introductions and the apologies, could I ask you to provide us with a karakia?
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. All right. E te hui whaia te mataranga kia marama, kia whai take ngā mahi katoa, tō maia, tō kaha, araha atu, araha mai, tātou, ia tātou katoa. So I just, for this gathering, seek knowledge for understanding, have purpose in all that you do, stand tall, be strong, let us show respect for each other.
Good, thank you. Right, so I recognise Carol online. Good morning, Carol. And Renee, I was going to say your picture's just disappeared, but from Audit New Zealand, welcome to you as well. Thank you for joining us for this meeting. Bruce will be joining us online, but he's an apology for lateness.
He's in the waiting room.
Oh, is he?
He's in the waiting room. So, Bruce.
You just give us a moment, we'll just...
Yes, we'll just take a moment to allow Bruce to come in from the waiting room. I hope he was sitting comfortably.
Do you want to just go through the rest of your need to do?
Okay, while we're waiting that, then we will call for apologies. And I think all members of the group are here, so no apologies. Just to point out that this is, in fact, the last meeting of this group. And it's also Andrew's very last meeting. So he walked in through that door with a smile as wide as I could have imagined. And so it's great for you to be here in this, this last of your meetings. So from all of us, happy last meeting and happy retirement. And we had the opportunity, of course, to say farewell to you formally before. So good. Still waiting for Bruce. So we will move on to disclosure of members' interests. Are there any? Yes, Ms. Susan.
Through you, Mr. Chair, page 112 of our agenda, or 89 of the actual annual plan, makes reference to contingencies. And in this instance, my conflict is in respect to the reporting or noting of an issue which was well covered in the press around Kodiak Consulting. And I don't know how well known it has been, but I was a victim of John Hall's misdemeanours. So although that doesn't present itself as a conflict in any meaningful sense, I thought it was helpful just to note that.
Good, thank you. Your disclosure is well noted there, but I agree with you. I don't think it's of relevance to the proceedings. So that's excellent. No others. So we'll move on. Late items. Are there any late items that we are aware of?
No.
No, there are none. Thank you. So we'll move to the confirmation of the order of the meeting. Again, I see no change to that. Thank you. Monty has been moved, seconded by Lou. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? Carried. And just before we move on, it's welcome to Claire St. Pierre, Councillor Claire St. Pierre, who is actually not a member of this committee, but she has a real interest in audit and risk. So may I have somebody move that Councillor Claire be given speaking rights? Thank you, Lou. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Monty. All those in favour of that, please say aye. All those against? That be confirmed. So thank you. Claire. And good morning, Bruce.
Yes, good morning. And I take it you've gone through the apologies, but while I'm here, firstly, apologies for lateness. Obviously, I didn't quite have the right link, unfortunately. Thank you, Zoe. And second, look, deep regret that I'm not with you guys today. Apparently, there was wind shear in the valleys around Queenstown yesterday afternoon, and it meant my flight didn't get away in time for a connection through to the Waikato. So, look, my deep apologies. I'm not there, Roger, but thank you for stepping in.
That's fine. And welcome to you. Thank you. And now we move on to the confirmation of minutes of the meeting of the 8th of September. They have been circulated and reviewed prior to this meeting. Are there any items of correction to those minutes before we move them? There being none, would somebody like to move that they be true and correct? We'll take Andrew as the mover and Monty as the seconder. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Carried. The first substantive item that we have is the annual report 2024 and 25, and I'd like to call to the table Yolanda, Hector and James Graham, who will be presenting this paper. And just, I think, to preface their presentation, this is being presented to this committee because this is the actual last meeting of this committee as it's consisted now. And therefore, it's, as the committee has been involved in the process, it felt wise to bring a draft version to this committee. And my understanding, which James is going to confirm, is that in fact the confirmed report will be, if the audit and risk is established in the next triennium, will receive the final report of this annual report. So who's going to start off?
Good morning, Chair and committee
Good morning.
members. Today's report provides an update on the 24-25 annual report and outlines the impact of the delayed audit, which is scheduled to start on the 20th of this month. The delay means that the incoming council will adopt the final audited report post-election. The unaudited draft is presented and reflects our financial position as at 30 June 2025. It will still undergo further reviews to look at spelling, punctuation and layout, etc. It also includes placeholders for local waters done well disclosure, pending input from Audit New Zealand and other stakeholders. Given the timing of the audit, the committee is requested to provide assurances or guidance to the incoming committee on the matters listed in the report to support a smooth transition. I'll hand over to our CFO to talk about the financial overview. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Yolanda. Good morning, all. I appreciate the due diligence you would have undertaken because it's a very big report and a very important report. It's effectively your contract with the community on what we rate for and how we tell them what we've done. Clearly, as Yolanda has said, it is a draft report. But I do want to point out one thing, and then I'll hand over to George to talk about potentially some of the non-financial items in there as well, is on the financial overview report, which will be page 44 of your diligent agenda. I wrote that about 2:30, 3 o'clock, just before this was due to go out for review, because we're very, very conscious to meet the timelines for delivery because it's such a big report and it requires more than just a weekend, certainly, to review it. It's probably fair to say I maybe had slightly more than a half glass full attitude at the time. And having sent this and reread it and thought about things, there's a couple of things in that report for the final, my CFO overview, I would change for the final. So in particular, under the section on page 44, and that particular section is where do we stand? I would change it from strong financial position to stable financial position. I think Just thinking about my thought process when I wrote this particular piece was, look, our balance sheet's in a very strong position. We've got significant assets. We've talked a lot about fixing our balance sheet by increasing particularly our water rates to support that. However, with the current financial headwinds that are going on at the moment, and also the heavy reliance on DC revenue collection in outer years, I think that was probably a bit strong. So I do want to point that out, that the final report, unless things change miraculously, I would, having written this again, in hindsight, I would change that to stable financial position. So that was the only comment I wanted to make on that, and then I'll hand over to George, and then we're happy to take any questions if that works.
Just before we go to George, that is noted. And as this is only a draft and it is subject to edits going forward, then I don't believe there's any need for us to formally move that as a change. Is that, yes? Good. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, James. So I just wanted to make a couple of comments. So the performance framework in this annual report is 4 years old, as we did the annual plan. So there are some measures in there that aren't quite as relevant as we would like them to be. And we've obviously revised the performance framework for the 2025 LTP. You'll see the summary of the annual resident perception survey results, noting you've had the opportunity to workshop those in some detail. They were stable in a challenging environment, indicating that the suite of strategic initiatives selected for delivery were appropriate. At a really high level, approximately 75% of the level of service performance measures met target, and that's very much in line with what we have delivered in previous years. There were a variety of reasons for those measures that did not meet target. You will see a little bit of a theme coming through around updating and closure of customer requests. We've been doing a significant amount of work, the customer experience team across the organisation in relation to that. And we've also just recently upgraded our customer request management system. So we're expecting to see some significant streamlining in that area. So I just wanted to highlight that. Overall, we don't anticipate any significant challenges in regard to the statement of service performance in the pending audit.
Good. Thank you very much. Before I open it to the floor, Bruce, would you like to come in here and perhaps share a few comments with us?
Look, I thank you, Roger, and again, thank you for deputising. I think if you allow me just a couple of minutes, I think there's a wee bit of context here we just need to keep in mind when we're dealing with it. You've dealt with that generally, as I would totally agree with Roger. This is almost like a phony war at this stage, because actually we're not close to the point of having the annual report finalised, or indeed the opinion given. That's still some months away, and I think we're now correct, the audit is yet to start. I think the importance of today is threefold. One is we are seeing a final or a near final version, draft final version, prior to the final audit. And I think it's important that we do this work today in front of Renee, so she can see that as a committee, we have seriously considered what we are wanting to represent to the community. So that's number one. Number two, we obviously have the context of the elections. So it's important that when this comes back to council in the new year, they are aware that while it's inconvenient for many reasons, in the last week prior to the elections, we have done the hard yards and we'll try and finalise as much as we can out of this meeting. And I think the third thing, which goes back to the workshop I enjoyed with you folk a month ago, is that actually, as I state with an audited set of financial statements, that's when you start living with it. In other words, is the analysis. And Monty, you and I talked strongly at that meeting about financial strategy, and this becomes the basis for the financial strategy that we're working on. So despite it being slightly forced at this stage, it actually is a really little important piece of work that we're doing. Roger, eventually, I think there are probably 4 things that we should just look through as a committee before we pass the resolutions. We needn't take long over it. I think there's firstly the front end of the annual report, which is through to about page 55. Most of us get about that far in reading. Some of us only get as far as page 2, but us accountants carry on at least to page 55. That's going to form the basis of any comments made about our guardianship of the finances in the 24-25 year post the election. And that warrants just, is this the year that we have seen as councillors? We're the only ones that can say that. The new council, even though a good number of you, I'm sure, will be back around the table, are less able to do that. I think, as James already spoken to, we just need to have a quick look at the financial results. And associated with that, there are 3 notes I think we should check through, which are notes 20, 25 and 27, because they're ones that will continue to move potentially up until the date that the annual report is adopted and opinion is given. And finally, it's only because it's how it forms, I think it's worthwhile just checking on the SSP, although George, you have nailed the 2 items that really came across my mind, which was the perception survey and the CRM. But if when it comes to discussion, Roger, we think about those 4 things, that puts us then in a good position to meet the challenge of the paper and indeed enabling staff to go forward.
Good. Thank you, Bruce. Now then, I've got your page 55. Jenny, you might be able to advise us on the page numbers of the notes and of the SSP.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, look, 55 put out of my ear. Yeah, by the way, I'm referring to the diligent agenda page,
Yes.
not the annual report page, just for clarity. Note 20 is on page 98. Note 25 is on page 110, and note 27 is on page 113.
Thank you.
The rest I'm more or less dealing, I would suggest we just deal with in terms of blocks or sections. In other words, the front end, the financial section, the non-financial performance or SSP section.
Good, thank you. Renee, I was actually going to come to you at this point, but if you don't mind, I think it might be wise to leave it until after we've had some discussion on these points around the table. Is that all right with you?
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, good. So perhaps if I could ask those seated around the table to move to page 55.
And before, by the way, Roger, sorry, 55 is the end or thereabouts. It's really the early pages that I'm of the draft annual report. I'm suggesting we have a quick squiz at. So I'd be looking from page, well, actually, it really starts at what, page 30 onwards. The next 20 pages.
Right, so I'll open that up for discussion. Andrew.
Thanks, Roger. Yeah, I've got a starter. Just going back, yeah, I'm quite happy with your, slight wording change on 44, and it's also on 44. I just wondered whether we would consider a sentence or 2 expanding on, well, it really goes to page 74, note 6 on other expenses. So the bulk of our deficit comes from, as is noted here, comes from non-cash items like asset revaluation and depreciation. I just wondered whether it was worth expanding that, just a sentence or 2 as to, delve into that, because it's such a big chunk of the deficit.
Valid point. And I see quite a few nods around the table. Yep.
Can I just explain a little bit more on this, because I'm sure there's going to be some more questions come up, and it's a pretty fundamental topic in here. Just a quick reminder, general accounting accepted principles is any impairments to assets through re-evaluations go straight to the P&L. So they go in as a loss or an expense. And any gains in our asset base through revaluations and the likes, which we know asset inflationary, that goes up, that goes on top of the asset into equity. So it's a mismatch between, and that's really, really important when you're looking at things like balanced budget metrics and the likes on actuals versus forecast. So when you think of our long-term plan and the forward-looking view, when you actually do the actual, what happens during the course of the year, those things can be fundamentally quite different, and you'll see that in some of the balanced budget actual numbers there. So it's a really important concept to remember in the context of how it works really, really good for private businesses, because you want that depreciation, you want those kind of evaluations because they're good tax efficiency, but not so much for councils.
Right, thank you.
Well,
Yes,
I
Andrew?
totally accept that, of course, but my thought was just a bit of a small explanation.
Yeah.
For the general public, yeah. I think I agree.
Noted.
Good. Carol, you've got your hand up.
Yes, it's on a similar topic. I think it's page 74. The line there talks about loss on disposal. And James, when you're referring to this, you're talking to it more around revaluation. So it's a big number, and I think for clarity for the readers, it would be helpful if we can just within the constraints of what the financial reporting allows, try and make it as clear as we can.
Yeah, that's right, Carol. Good point. Just to add to that, that's gone to F&C pretty much over the whole course of since I've come on board as happening as we got ready for our asset revaluation. So that has been well articulated on what the causes of that are. But I agree, Carol, we could add more detail into this report. The kind of so what. Yeah.
Good. Thank
Yes,
you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, Carol.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. Any further comments? Yes, Monty.
I look very much on a similar vein. The statutory things that we have to report under the financial regs, I thought that the biggest variations there, some of the explanations aren't quite good enough for a casual reader. They make sense to those of us who have been sitting around the table the whole year, but I just thought, and it follows exactly from what you're saying, Andrew, because that's one of them. That's the balanced budget benchmark. I just thought we could tune up the explanations. They don't have to be longer. They just have to be clear. So that was the balanced budget one. Another example is the rates increases affordability one, where we're way out. It's a massive variance. I thought we should just be really clear that we are the black line comes from the previous LTP, and that's just not entirely clear that what plans we're talking about. So that was those two, and same again on the debt control benchmark and the good one, the operations control benchmark, which is a massive positive. Again, I thought we could just slightly better explain what's going on there. Okay.
Can I make a comment that on what Councillor Montgomery said, because it's a really important point on like the rates of affordability issue. If you have a look at that, you say, "Go, that's terrible," right? But it's in the context of our 2021 LTP, and the financial strategy was set there. And what do we have in there? LGIC plus 2%. So it's a legacy of a very low rating council. So we automatically exceed anything over inflation, the local government index plus 2%, which we know we rated at 14.8. So this has been a continuing theme through this around mismatches of the financial of the LTPs, and also you need to take into account as well the different debt ceilings through here as well. We've had 3 different debt ceilings through the compilation of this time period. So some figures have 175, some have 250, some have the latest one. So quite a difficult thing to write and explain and get clear, but definitely open to adding more wording and around that.
Good. So you mentioned 3 particular areas there. You've made a note of those, and we look forward to seeing some clarification of those points when we get the next version of the annual plan. Any further questions around the table? Can I now ask Steph, any from yourself or any from the staff at all?
No, I'm
No?
happy here and support the team.
Yeah.
I just want to thank them for the great job. As James has just said, it's been an extremely difficult extremely difficult year to pull this together and on top of the multiple corporate planning pieces of work that are going on. So I just would like to acknowledge the team for the work that they've done, Roger.
Thank you. Can I now direct you to page 98? And that is the notes. Note 20, sorry, it's actually on page 99. Provisions, note 20. Bruce, do you want to start off the discussion there?
So look, Roger, within the statement of accounting policy, so by the way, can I say I haven't entered the past discussion because actually I agree with the sentiment of the committee. Monty, the one thing I would have said up front here, and James, I think it would be worthwhile working on, given all the significant changes that we're talking about, indeed the problem of the comparator being year 4 of the old LTP, is plain English. And I think we've got to try and find a better way through that financial overview, which expresses this in plain English. But the bones of it are there, which are really superb. So, and I agree with you about your strong, stable. I think that makes a lot of sense. And Roger, I have indicated to George that I've got all my points are minor editorial, perhaps that plain English sense. I've suggested to George that I just catch up with them over any of the detailed comment I have after the meeting. There's nothing here in principle that I'm disagreeing with or would want to add to what the committee has done. In terms of the finances, obviously it's the accounting policies which determine how we measure and how we represent and disclose our financial performance. And it's all pretty much straightforward. The critical thing is that there are some areas of judgment that require councillors, along with management, to assess how they measure something. And there are 4 things we noted in our accounting policies. We don't need to go back to it. It's just further back up in the notes. It's actually in note 1. Which is the fair value of the assets. So that's the revaluation of the assets. I think that's worked through. I suspect probably Renee may even have some comments on that, given I suspect that's probably being looked at. We fair value our asset base. So that's everything that gives rise to the periodic, regular, almost annual revaluation of our assets, certainly of its assessment against contract rates, etc. And there is a significant adjustment in below the line in our financial performance with that revaluation number coming through. Off the top of my head, it's over $100 million, and which, as we all know, gives rise to that challenge of depreciation. The second one is the landfill aftercare costs. They're pretty straightforward, but we do need to make an estimate of actually what are the costs we are incurring now by having a landfill that we will have to pay out in the future. And that's the problem of owning existing or closed landfills. The third item, and I'll be interested to hear Renee on this because it probably tripped us up last year, was capital WIP. Again, it's an assessment of value judgment recommended by management in terms of actually what capital WIP, and of course as a growing council we've got a good number, what of capital WIP should remain as WIP, or indeed either capitalised or, more importantly, perhaps isn't capable of being capitalised and should be expensed. That is a significant judgment call on our part. And the fourth one is that we note in there is the valuation of the Waikato Regional Airport. I don't propose we deal with that because I think it's pretty straightforward in terms of the approach. So that gets us, Roger, to note 20, amongst other things, which is provisions. And this is where we have an obligation from a past transaction, but we haven't yet paid out. So really the best question I can have here is say, James, what have we done around cut-off, around trying to assess liabilities or quantified liabilities which may not have existed at balance date, but relate to transactions prior to balance date, and we have found out. What do we do to test and check that this number is complete?
Over to you, James.
That's a very good question. I'll probably get a bit of backup with Yolanda there as well. So what we do is we work very closely with legal to ensure that we're aware of all legal potential issues that are out there and the likes, council, and then we use the relevant accounting principles in terms of likelihood of occurring and being able to accurately value what that potential future liability could look like. And we make that assessment. In addition to that, we do, prior to year end, take what I'd call environmental scan across the whole organisation to see what's out there that we're not aware of in finance, to make sure that we've captured that as well. I'll probably hand over to Yolanda to talk more about her role and what she works with audit and legal to confirm. If you want to add anything more to that, Yolanda.
Don't have anything to add. Thank you, Chair.
All right, open up the floor. Yes, Monty.
The provision I think you're referring to has crystallised subsequent to balance date. Is that right? So this one, maybe Bruce doesn't actually know that, but the significant one has crystallised. Therefore, does it stay as a provision or does it actually get tidied up? That was my understanding, that it has to change.
So the accounting standards has an adjusting and a non-adjusting accounting entry, depending on the classification, so that it is accounted for appropriately in their results.
So confirming it is accounted for in the annual report. Yes, thank you. Any further questions?
Sorry, just to be really clear, does that mean the number has flowed through into the accounts and it's no longer a provision?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Renee, although I said I'd leave you till the end, but there was reference there to perhaps your opinion on something. Would you like to come in at this stage, or are you still happy to wait until after we've made all the considerations?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm happy to wait until the end.
Good, thank you. So we now go on. I think your next note of reference was reference
contingencies. Note 25, Roger.
Yes.
Can I, Roger, can just make a comment on James and Yolanda's points, which are quite right. So really, I mean, all I'm doing, I mean, you give me the answer on you give me James. I'm not trying to be smart, but I think it's important that we just hear that there has been that work through, and we recognise that we do need to potentially recognise and provide for matters which may only appear post 30 June 25, but which we need to back into the old year, to use some barbarised accounting terms. It actually also reflects and goes back to your point, James. When you sign off in December, it will be important that you have an up-to-date legal briefing before you agree, because it could affect provisions and it could affect contingencies, and indeed it could affect the events after balance date. And we need to recognise that because of, and no criticism, I understand it entirely, because of the late adoption of the annual report, what we disclose in these three notes, probably more the contingency and the events after balance date, could keep changing up until the day we adopt the final annual report. So look, legal briefing, but that's not needed now. That's needed for when you get close to the point of adoption. So contingencies, look, again, they are what they are. James and Yolanda look pretty consistent with my understanding of our last meeting's legal briefing, and I think it's fine, but I just wanted to make certain that we were, at this point, comfortable it's up to date. That's probably a question to you, James.
Yep. James, are we up to date?
Yes. Simply, yes,
I
we're
like
up to
these
date.
short answers. Good.
It needn't take more than that, Roger. It needn't take more. I'm just trying to do my normal inquisitorial role here.
Hey, from Monty.
Can I just query that one? So we're on note 25, contingencies, and it says council is listed as sole guarantor for a number of community organisation bank loans or bank overdrafts. Okay, and then the guarantees line is 150, which is MEIT. Yes, that's the only one I'm aware of, and I had highlighted that to query because I'm not aware.
That should be the singular, not the plural.
Singular, not the plural.
Yeah, we'll fix it.
Thank you.
I suspect that's from previous reports left in there.
Good. Thank you, James, for that. Right, on to note 27 on page 113.
If I just take over again, Roger, this is I
Yes.
said, the third of the trifecta. Look, and it's in yellow. I appreciate that because it probably, as I say, is something that was difficult for us to anticipate. The question, the only thing that's highlighted there, which will definitely have to be in there, will be the local waters, the Waikato waters done well note. There is a relatively standard disclosure, I think promulgated by the office and by Audit New Zealand around this. It's all put in there and subject to change because for most councils, it's subject to the approval of the water service delivery plan by the minister. And honestly, sorry, I've forgotten where Waikato Water's done well. It's sat on that one. But it will require some form of note, and I suspect Renee will point out that I think every council will get some level of emphasis of matter drawing reference to that note, given its importance to the ongoing future of the local authority concerned. So again, look, the question really becomes, we know about water's done well. Is there anything else that would come up at this stage? And again, James, it may be, have you got anything on watch as far as this is concerned, or is it actually probably only water's done well at this stage that's going to appear in there?
Waikato water's done well is probably enough, to be honest. But no, there's nothing else that we're aware of at this stage.
Good.
Yeah.
And perhaps ask Steph for any comment on Waikato Water's done well, as she's probably more up to date than anybody on the Waikato Water's done well.
In what context would you like to understand that?
No,
Roger, I think, I mean, it's progressing. Obviously, the board has now been established. They're recruiting for a chief executive. Our transition plan has been approved by council. There's a team now working on it. There's a governance structure for it. And I think we can be satisfied that we can report to the point that we can. And in this report, it will be next year's report that there'll be significant updates, I would imagine.
thank you.
Yeah. Or I'd expect, not imagine.
Yes,
Add to
Lou?
that, there are contingencies that are out there at the moment with the government itself, changing the Resource Management Act and also the Emergency Management Act. And there's a lot of costs that will come through with that over that period of time. So we have to be aware that those contingencies, when they arrive and how they arrive. But I can't see us being able to quantify that yet. But the government is working on it, and we do know that it is out there.
Yeah, there are a number of unknowns that are out there, aren't there? Yeah. Anything further on that, James?
Oh, it's probably what I said right at the beginning of this meeting is we're in real uncertain times and a lot of headwinds. So we just need to try and be looking forward as much as we can and understanding things. And we've got a very good regulatory, we've got a very good strategy team and regulatory team that's, I think, is trying their best to make sure that we all get a heads up.
Thank you.
Roger, may I ask a question?
Yes, of course you must, Steph.
Thanks, Roger. Bruce, I have a question for you, and Carol, actually. I'm interested to know, I think this is a really important conversation, very hard to quantify, as Lou is saying. How are you seeing other councils capturing this uncertainty and potentially the cost of addressing central government reform going forward, or recognising that in the annual report to date, knowing that we're sitting here with a lot of uncertainty other than where we've got to with waters? How are you seeing other councils address that? I'm interested. Actually, might be a question.
Shall I go first, Carol? I won't tell you what number annual report this is, Steph, so I was scared somebody would ask me that question. Look, there is a question about, I mean, look, Lou, your point is well made. And the question is, does it meet the threshold that it would be disclosed in any formal way in the notes to the accounts, these three notes that we're talking, well, really the last two, if not just the contingency note. And subject to probably having to check, Steph, the answer is no, they are not shown. However, most annual reports that I have overseen this year would reflect the challenges of 25, 26, or indeed beyond. And I would suggest we could be open to perhaps a more explicit disclosure in that front end, my so-called first 20 pages, around some of the challenges, some of the headwinds that we see coming up. And Lou, you're right on the money, unfortunately, that actually there is the prospect of legislative change, but still, uncertain how it will affect operations, uncertain as to the costs or otherwise that it might impose on council. So it's a long way of coming back to, Steph, probably not through the formal annual report because it doesn't meet the thresholds, but certainly in some reasonably clear way up the front of an annual report that there are challenges for us as a council going forward, which include these items.
Good suggestion. Is that Andrew?
Yeah, but just to comment on it, I totally agree that it's uncertain, but it is certain that it's going to cost. What's uncertain is how much.
It was like a 2-year.
Yes.
And I totally agree with you, Bruce. I think that's, and Lou, what you're saying, it is something that should be addressed in the annual report to make, not only ratepayers, but any other reader aware that these things are in front of us.
Good. So a good suggestion there for, I think, Yolanda to take note of in the initial pages of the annual report. Good. Thank you. We're now down to your last point, Bruce, which is SSP.
Yeah. Look, I am generally very comfortable with the disclosures that are in the last part of the report. I mean, I think we've been pretty faithful. I think the gradations of the three different levels of achieved nearly and not achieved are good. And I think in lots of ways I took out of it actually the stuff, I said at my opening remarks, Roger, there's room here for good analysis. What does this performance tell us? How does that affect our strategies going forward? One of them is obviously learning to count. And Steph, there's a synchronicity here as I leave the organisation. The first time I met you was to talk about CRMs, but in a different context. And here with YPAR. And look, and I'm conscious that reading this stuff, it's quite clear that actually you're addressing the whole CRM issue. I do have some minor points around that. For instance, I think under animal control, Roger, we say we've achieved 74% or number thereof. If our CRM had been working properly, it would have been 84. Now, I sort of want to know, why don't we just report 84? If we know and can prove it's 84, we should do that, not just because a faulty system says it's 74, if we've got the evidence that in fact it's 84. And we must have the evidence because we're actually asserting it. If we can't support the 84, we've got to get it out of the accounts, if you know what I mean. So there are one or two minor things there, particularly around the CRM and disclosure that's needed there. Look, the other thing that clearly gives anything other than green in this is the perception survey. And look, I wasn't party to your workshop where you considered that, but I just want to say well done on being absolutely transparent, knowing that perception survey generally creates a level of challenge for the new council going forward. So I don't believe that perception, by the way, but it is what the community thinks. So well done on your transparency and not relenting from disclosing openly the results of that. So Roger, I don't have any other comments apart from some minor ones which I'll feed back, as I've said, to the staff after the meeting. But I just think again we need to reflect. This is showing our physical performance, what we delivered. It's worthwhile councillors just spend the time now to consider whether there's any comments that want to make on that part of the annual report.
Good suggestion. I'll open it up to members on the floor. Any comments? Yes, Monty.
I just want to back up, Bruce. I thought it was actually a pretty fair assessment, and I too noted the resident perception survey and thought it was pretty straight up kind of assessment of what we had received in the committee, that that received that report, and yeah, I thought it was good. It also really brought home to me how important these performance measures are, because when you're setting the long-term plan, it's not something that perhaps, or me as a new councillor, I'll speak for myself, didn't focus on enough. And then when you come to this part of the reporting cycle, you actually realise it's really, really important, because it is how you're scoring yourself. So going forward, I definitely will be putting more emphasis in my mind on what these performance measures are that we're going to rate ourselves against. And just to finish on one little bit of good news, planning and regulatory, we marked ourselves at 95.54%. I think that's a mistake, and I think we're 98.54%. So I've got a bunch of other small ones, but I just wanted that one. Thanks.
Positive comment to finish. Thanks, Monty. Any further comments? Claire, you've been particularly quiet. Not like you.
Oh, I've just been learning a lot, listening to what people have been commenting on and things like that. Yes, I mean, I agree with the resident perception survey and the results there, and also the continuing challenge of the CRM management. I did wonder whether or not we have enough assurance that the interventions or the extra training that's in place is sufficient to make sure that these aren't ongoing challenges. And in fact, I did wonder about whether or not the systems themselves should be designed so, they are fail safe. You shouldn't need to train the users of the system. The system should be designed so it automatically does the right thing, so that you're not constantly having things falling through the cracks because people are sick or, there are new people using the system.
Good, thank you.
I might just respond to that, because I
Yeah.
think they were really good points, Councillor St Pierre. Just to put it into a bit of context, our customer request system is like 10 or 15 years old, really, really old. So we've literally just finished upgrading it about a month ago. We went live. It's significantly more simplified from a user perspective. So we anticipate, in terms of assurance, that it will be more accurate. We did some baselining, and we will do some further measurement as part of the project to provide some assurance around that. So we were dealing with something that was pretty old and pretty clunky. So really the only way was up.
Forward, forward, forward. Yes, indeed. Thank you. Any further? No? Do you have any comments that you'd like to make at this stage, Steph?
No, thanks, Roger.
Good. Excellent.
I'm interested to know what Renee's got
Yes,
to say.
indeed. I was going to say now is your time, Renee, having listened to us. The floor is now yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora koutou. Nothing exciting from the audit office this morning, which I guess is also good news. There haven't been any changes since our last update provided early September. Our audit team, as Yolanda mentioned, is scheduled to be back on site on the 20th of October. That's in 2 weeks. They are stretched out for 7-week period, so that's quite a period. And then our expected audit clearance date, if all goes well, is aimed for the 2nd week of December. Just want to note that we're really appreciative of the progress that management has made up to now, to be ready for the audit when we start, and for this committee, the robust considerations of this morning. It's appreciated. That's everything from me. If there's any questions, happy to take.
Right. Any questions of Renee? There being none, thank you, Renee, for that. And some excellent discussion. Yes, indeed. So I'll now point you to the recommendation on page 19, if I may. Give you time to get there. Oh, sorry, did you have some? Right. That the Audit and Risk Committee, A, receives the report of Yolanda Hector, Manager Finance, Annual Report 2024-25 update. B, reviews the unaudited draft Annual Report 2024-25 as it currently stands. And C, provides assurance on the matters listed below to the incoming council. And D, notes the implication of the audit delay on the audit opinion on the annual report 2024-25 and the next steps associated with the audit. Mayor Susan has moved. Councillor Andrew Brown has seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Carried. Thank you. We now move, thank you, Yolanda, and James. Give you time to sit comfortably. And welcome Diana for our next item on the agenda, and it is a paper on elected member workshops. Over to you, Diana.
Thank you. Morena koutou. So the purpose of my report is to provide the outcome of an investigation that was undertaken by staff into elected member workshops. And that was as a result of a concern that was raised at the last Audit and Risk Committee about an apparent dramatic increase in public excluded workshops since 2022. So I take the report as read and we'll just summarise the key details. So staff looked into the issue and undertook a review to determine the number of public excluded workshops that occurred from 2017 until August 2025. And the results are shown in the report itself. So these highlight there's actually been a reduction in the overall number of public excluded workshops since 2022. It did highlight that there was a slight increase in the percentage of public excluded workshops between 2024 and 2025, but that was thought as not surprising given the Local Waters Done Well work stream and the long-term plan work stream that was occurring over that time. In October 2023, the Chief Ombudsman undertook a wider review of council practices with workshops and produced a number of recommendations. And at the time, staff looked into those recommendations and implemented a number of improvements, which included greater transparency about public excluded workshops, including publishing them in advance on our website and putting the reasons. So we have surmised that perhaps the reason why there might be perception of more public excluded workshops is because we have increased our transparency over that time. So overall, staff have concluded that we don't think that this is an emerging risk. We actually think we have very robust processes around workshops and when a decision is made for them to be in a public excluded environment. So hopefully this report provides reassurance to the committee, but very happy to take any questions on that point.
Good, thank you. Now, obviously, as this paper was actually in some way requested by myself, I did actually prepare a little comment on it, but can I open the floor first? And then perhaps I'll come back with my comment at the end. Yes, Monty.
Mr. Chair, could we hear your comment first?
Yes, indeed. Of course you may.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to check about the data. When you say the PE workshops, is that a workshop where it's totally public excluded? Because, you know, I'm aware that we quite often have a mix, and I wasn't sure in the way you've counted whether or not you've, say there was an open workshop that had one item that was public excluded. How have you accounted for that in that chart in table 1? Is it in the total workshops, or, I mean, is it in the PE workshops? Even like there might have been, say, 4 items in a workshop day, 3 of them were open, 1 of them was closed. How have you accounted for that in this table?
So each item is counted as a workshop.
Oh, okay, right, cool. It's good to have that clarified. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully this won't take too long. Thank you, Diana, for the paper, particularly those in public excluded. I find the table of the percentages of public excluded workshops very interesting. Over the 9 years featured, the average number of workshops per year was 79, with 33 of them on average being held public excluded. and that's over 41% of workshops publicly excluded. Admittedly, 2004 saw a decline, but this year shows that it's perhaps on its way back up again, particularly as we've only had 3/4 of the year. However, my analysis in terms of detail focused on this year, and you and I are in agreement. I made it 34.5, you made it 34.9, so we're not going to split hairs on that little bit. I still consider that the amount is very high when the default is that workshops should be open. I did some analysis of the reasons for workshops to be made public excluded, and I found that a frequent emphasis was placed on the phrase to maintain the effective conduct of public affairs through free and frank discussion. Now, I've mentioned 3 examples. I'm not going to repeat those here. On the 4th of August 2022, the Chief Ombudsman, Peter Boshier, stated, local bodies are not allowed to exclude the public from meetings so they can hold free and frank discussions behind closed doors. The staff guide, which you pointed me to in resource material, was last updated in 2024, which was last year, and yet it still maintains on page 2 the provision for free and frank expression of opinion as a valid reason for making a workshop public excluded. So I think that in itself is a little conflict. And my final comment on this was that I suggest that this paper plus the staff handbook, which is not an official council policy, just be referred for consideration to council in the next triennium.
Can Diana just clarify that first piece before we move on to the second piece, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Through the chair. So meetings are subject to the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act, and under that you can only have public excluded meetings for the grounds set out in that Act, which does not include free and frank, that exclusion you mentioned. Workshops are not meetings. They fall outside of the requirements of the Lagoima. So the grounds under Lagoima don't actually apply for workshops, but what we do need to do is, because we have duties for transparency, is to always have reasonable grounds for having any workshop in the public excluded environment. And what we use is those grounds under Lagoima as sometimes a way to justify doing that, because the grounds that elected members are familiar with for the meetings context. But to clarify, the exceptions for meetings, they don't apply for workshops. So it is justifiable. If they're justifiable grounds, you can have a public excluded workshop under free and frank because of that need to be able to, on occasion, have circumstances where you need to have that exchange of opinions. So that's why we have our workshops under that ground, but we don't apply that for meetings.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. It still doesn't change my opinion that this actually should be referred to council in the next triennium, because if there is a change of councils, then it's going to be quite important that they understand this whole environment of workshops and meetings and the reasons for such. Monty, you said that you...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And look, thanks for this piece of work. It's a narrative that you hear out there, in the community. So it was really good to add some data to it. So yeah, a good piece of work. And Mr. Chair, I fully support this going to full council, this report. And I suggest we could amend the resolution. We receive it and recommend it to be presented to full council, because I think it is really good for everyone to be on the same page.
Yeah, good.
Understand the data that is underlying the question of how much we're doing in public excluded. So look, that's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further comment?
Thank you, John.
Luke?
I've reviewed this and had quite a think about the policy. We have to consider, of course, what we've had to deal with over the last year or so. So the Three Waters particularly has been an issue where we're being put into a situation where we have to decide or get made aware of what other councils and other people are doing. And that is really, it was information that is privileged. All right. So we had to have probably a little extra. So there is a place. I agree totally with Councillor Montgomery. I think that this could go forward to our new council. We can review this and with our new, new members, elected members, and we can have a look at it and see what we want to make with it. I do feel very strongly sometimes that we do have information given to us at a workshop that is possibly privileged. Then this is beyond waters, just something that is occurring, and it is possibly best that we are given that in a confidential situation. But beyond that, I think that it's not a good thing to do. We need to be that we are a public body.
Good, thank you. Any comments online? I just saw a little
Sorry, no,
hand going up to my right.
Charging cable. Look, I'm absolutely consistent, I think, with Monty and indeed the comments you've expressed to me. Thank you for your comments, Dan. I think that's, I get it. I think the critical thing about workshops is that good workshops are really a very valuable tool set in a elected member's toolkit for making good decisions. And the thing I focused on was actually, what is the purpose for a workshop? I think they're really needed. And I know the Ombudsman says it's particularly good and useful, and I agree with this from my personal experience, discussing early policy work or background information from staff and experts and clarifying and being enabled to give feedback. And it strikes me that's really important, because if there's one thing that we're going to need to do as a council going forward, it's making good decisions. And I reckon our workshops are a really important part. So I agree that the PX stands in the middle of all of that. So hence, Monty, agree. This would be useful, probably an induction, for there to be a common understanding of the position of how we reach the decision to either be an open or PX. Thank you, Roger.
Good, thank you, Bruce. While we're online, Carol?
Look, I'm really comfortable with the suggestion. I think it's great to have the data, and Dana, thank you for your clarifications. Yeah.
Good, thank you. Claire?
Yes, thanks. I also think that workshops have got a really important place in the way we conduct our business. I find them really useful. I'm just following up on something that you've mentioned though, Diana, and it's to do with Peter Bosier's report. It's called Open for Business, because you were making a distinction between the requirements for meetings compared to workshops. But in this AI summary that I've got, it does say that Mr. Bosier did say that that you shouldn't use a workshop as an excuse, to prevent that transparency, and in particularly what I've got here is that councils using terms like hui or forum to describe workshops are still bound by the same transparency and record keeping requirements. So I just wanted to test that with you, that we are very clear that even though it is a workshop, it is as transparent as possible, and maybe even subject to legoimus. Well, like you said, it's not subject to legoimus, but if there's record keeping required, surely that would make it accessible under those information requests.
Through the chair, so legoima has two parts, which is the information request and also the meeting requirements. In the meeting, it's not, workshops aren't subject to the meeting requirements under legoima, but of course, the documentation is subject to the official information availability principles under that Act.
Yeah, cool.
And yes, you're absolutely right. Whatever we call a gathering of sorts, that will be all subject, as we're subject to the Local Government Act, to that principle of transparency. And so we have, as part of that review, tried to embed more of that. So that's why we are putting information on our websites and being transparent about when we are doing these PX gatherings.
Thank you. Susan.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Look, I just wanted to echo Monty and Bruce's comments there, and it's really interesting that the characterisation often made in this area is clearly being debunked by the data. But look, I'm a really firm believer, as many of you around this table, that those workshops are designed to promote improved decision making and informed decision making, and I think it's critical that we preserve the option to do that, and when it is legislatively and legally enabled, because I think that's what people expect us to do. One question of you though, Diana, is do we have any idea where we sit in terms of the volume of PX workshops or workshops in general relative to our peers up and down the country? So I should have asked you, let you know I was going to ask this before, so you may have done some work around it. I haven't.
Unfortunately, I don't have that data to hand. Sorry.
It just might be quite interesting. It might be something that LGNZ may hold as well, to give us some context around where we sit in terms of the sector.
Good. Any further comment? Joe, I believe you might have an amended resolution that you've quickly put together. And I can't read that. So, that the Audit and Risk Committee received the report of Diana Aquilina, Legal Counsel, titled Elected Member Workshops, ECM number 11540055, and recommend that the report be presented to the incoming council. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Monty. Thank you, Lou. Just before I put it, I'm assuming that because the report mentions the staff handbook, that is actually part of that recommendation. Would that?
Sorry, can you just reference where you're seeing that piece, Councillor Gordon? Which page of the agenda?
No, it's in the report.
We're referring, I think we're referring to the guide in the
The
first
guide,
instance.
that's right. Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's in the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thank you. So I've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Carried. Thank you. Well, there we are. That brings us to the end of, resolution to exclude the public. Thank you. Moved by Andrew, seconded by. And just out of explanation for those that perhaps are listening online, is that we do have some